Welcome back to the Peanut Butter and Mountains podcast. Today we have a guest who has not only mastered the art of backpacking, but also turning his passion into his full-time job on YouTube. So through his YouTube channel, Stephen Smith shares his extensive knowledge about backpacking gear, tips, tricks, and the latest technology, which we'll get to some of his favorites at the end of the podcast here. And Stephen's one of those guys that, for me, I found him on YouTube and I watch him again and again because he has a gift of making important but sometimes boring topics like super interesting and entertaining. And he does a really, really good job with his editing, his different, switching up his shots. I just love it. And so, like I said, I first found Stephen on YouTube, but then I heard a podcast with him and Kyle Hates Hiking on Kyle Hates Hiking's podcast Trail Tales. And I actually DM'd Kyle after it. And I said, dude, loved your podcast with Stephen. It was so good. And he's like, hey, man, you should have him on. He was super rad. So here he is. How's it going, Stephen?
Here I am. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing super well, man. So like I was talking to Stephen before the podcast, I'm super interested in all things like with his rise on YouTube. Because within the last year and a half, man, you have exploded on that. And I looked back on a lot of your older videos. Like, you've been on YouTube, though, for a few years. So tell me kind of about that start and maybe your progression into YouTube that actually led you to quitting your job.
Yeah, so I kind of think about the channel as having two beginnings. And so I started the channel first in 2019, which actually, it depends on how you really want to get into this. And so way back in 2009, I started a blog because that was the thing to do back then, was to blog. But I've got no business writing a blog. I'm dyslexic. I can't spell. I can't use grammar to save my life, right? And so, it was just a train wreck. The blog was a train wreck. But as I know that from, doing social media and stuff like that, you start to get some recognition, you start to get some brands that want to send you stuff, you start to get some things that you're like, man, I'm actually doing something here, and it's almost like a surprise, right? And so I had the blog, and the blog was doing that. I got some gear for free. I got some brands that wanted to do some different things, and I was stoked about it, right? I was just having a good time. But I was working a full-time job that entire time. And so the blog would come and go, and something happened where it just disappeared off the internet. I could see it, but nobody else could. And every time I went in to try to figure out why that was the case, I couldn't figure it out. And so I was just I don't have time for this. And so I would just put it on the back burner. And then somewhere around 2018, 2019, I decided I wanted to revive it. And so I did. And I had this buddy that was like, dude, what are you doing messing around with this blog? You need to be making videos, because he knew I could make videos. He'd seen videos I made. And but to me, that was always so much work was making a video. I was like, man, you have no idea how much time
totally, dude,
goes into making a video. If I just take some pictures and write some stuff, that takes a whole lot less time.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't care. You need to be making videos. So sometime around, I want to say it was May of 2019, I had a backpacking trip planned in southern Colorado. I was going out there, California. I was going out there for a conference, and I was going to tack on a few days to go backpacking. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to make a video. And so I did, and I shot the whole thing on my phone and edited it there while I was at the conference and put it out there. And I remember, because this is the very first video on my channel, so depending on how far back you've gone. But I did it like I was being interviewed, like in a documentary, where you're not looking at the camera, you're looking at the person that's interviewing you, right? And really what I had was an iPad that I had bungee corded to a tree because I was outside, and I had my script or whatever on the iPad, and so I was just reading off the iPad onto the and recording myself the whole time, and I put the video out, and it didn't do very good at all, because the very first video you put out, it's just it's just not going to do anything, right?
Right.
And so 2019, I made 5 videos maybe, right? And
wow.
And I had one that kind of did a little bit, it got maybe 1,000 views or something like that, and I was like, oh, that's doing really good, and I was excited about it. But work got in the way, and I was just like, I don't have time for this. pandemic hit in 2020 and work got really stressful for me because of that. And so I was like, I didn't make any videos from probably October 2019 until March of 2021. I never made another video. But during that time, so, I mean, and so that was the first beginning of the channel, was 2019, 5 videos. But during that time, like, those videos were racking up views. People were subscribing. I think I got like 600 subscribers over the course of 2020 while I was doing nothing. And so every once in a while I would think about it and I'd go look at it and I'd be like, oh, like, hey, like, people are actually showing up and they're watching and they're subscribing. And to me, without context of YouTube and social media, I was like, 600 people, that's a lot of people, right? And so I thought, I'm going to start making videos again, and 600 people are going to watch every time, was my thinking.
Right.
It's not the way it works. So I had a trip planned to the Grand. Oh, and so important information here. January 2021, I quit my job, not to start YouTube, not to go back into YouTube, just because I was burnt out. I was sick of it. I needed a break. And we had saved up some money. My wife she was working part-time, and so she went full-time. And the plan was for me to just take a break, take like a year off. And so we saved enough money to where with her income and the money we had saved, like, I could do that, and I could just like recharge and like, get my mental health in order and all that kind of stuff. And so January 1st, 2021, I quit with no plan for the future. And in March, I had a backpacking trip planned with a buddy of mine to the Grand Canyon. And so I was like, you know what? Like, whenever I was making videos, like, I really enjoyed making videos. And so I'm going to make another video. And I had all these, I had 600 subscribers, that I was like, they're wondering where I am, like, they want to know, like, where's the videos from Steven? And so we went on that trip. I filmed a video of it. And while we were on that trip, I was having such a good time making the video and all that kind of stuff, and talking to my buddy about it, he was probably just amusing me. Like, oh yeah, like, all those people they're going to show up. And I committed myself on that trip. I was like, I'm going to make a video a week. And I'm just going to commit myself to that because I don't have a job and I've got the time and I enjoy doing it. So I'm going to do a video a week and I'm just going to put all my effort into it. And so I did. And like, I don't know, like that first video, like 25 people watched, something like that, and it was discouraging. I put out another video, like another, maybe 30 people watched. It was discouraging. And so I just kept doing it because I committed myself to it, and slowly started building up this audience. And I got to, I want to say I got to like 800 subscribers, maybe 900 subscribers. And I was really needing that like pushover. And so I reached out to Dan Becker and I was like, hey, Dan, like, you don't know me. But I was wondering if you do a collaboration, and he was very kind, very generous. He was like, I don't do that. He's like, but you're doing a really good job. And he's like, I tell you what, like, I'll share one of your videos on my community tab. And I was like, dude, would you, like, that'd be so awesome.
No
and so he
way.
did. Yeah. So he shared. So I've got like 800 subscribers, maybe. Shared one of my videos. It went to 10,000 views, which is the biggest video I'd ever had at that point, and I was like, oh my gosh, and that pushed me over 1,000 subscribers. And so that video pushed me over 1,000 subscribers. And I was like, okay, now I can like start making money, monetize, and all this kind of stuff, monetize the channel. Yeah. With the AdSense. And I had a friend who lived in the same town as me, and he had a channel, and he had maybe 2,000 something subscribers, something like that. And so like, I'm thinking like, this guy knows what he's doing. And he was making $200 a month off of AdSense on YouTube. And I remember thinking, like, you can make that kind of money.
I know,
on YouTube?
bro. I know.
I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I went on a backpacking trip that summer, and I had my camera, and I mean, people who hike with me know, like, I got a big mirrorless camera that's got a big microphone on it. The whole thing's like 6 pounds, and I carry it in my hand because I'm using it all the time. And so I'm carrying that camera around, and some guy stops me. He's like, what's the camera for? And so I tell him, oh yeah, I got a little YouTube channel. And he's like, oh, that's cool, And so he hikes on, and then we keep catching up to each other, like back and forth, like keep running into each other. And he's like, hey, I meant to ask, like, can you make money doing that? And I was like, well, I don't make any money, but let me tell you about my friend who's making $200 on
Right.
YouTube. Because it just blew my mind. And so I'm like
Right.
impressed, so impressed I'm telling some other guy about it, right? And so that was the summer of 2021. And I remember I think it was in October is when my first video really kind of caught the algorithm, and it started doing really well. And then other people started watching other videos. And so like one video caught the algorithm. That brought people to go see what other videos I had on there. And there was one video that every time someone went to look at my channel, this is what I assumed was happening, what I deduced was happening. They would always click on that video. And so then that video, which had been out for like 2 months or more, just exploded. And
Right.
so the algorithm caught onto that trend, that everybody that comes to my channel, that's the first video, that's the second video they click on, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it just started exploding. And sometime during that fall, as the channel was just really growing very rapidly, I started to realize, okay, I can make a living doing this, and started seeing the money coming in, and started thinking, okay, and my year long break, right, was coming to an end, and so I was gonna have to figure out like what I was gonna do, either we were continue this way, where the savings was going to run out. My wife was going to continue working full time, and I was going to be the domestic partner, which kind of is what has happened. Or I was going to find a job, and so I decided I'm just going to go all in on YouTube and keep going. And so the money from AdSense started working pretty well by the end of that year, 2021, and by February of 2022, I'd gotten my first real sponsor, my first big sponsor. There was money that just made me so nervous to ask for that I just, like I think whenever I was on the phone with the person who I was negotiating with, like my voice started to squeak because I was asking for this really big money, and they said yes, and it blew my mind, and I just kept going from there. So that's kind of the story of how the channel came to be.
First of all, dude, love this origin story. That almost should be a video on your channel. I think people would really eat that up, man. That's so cool.
Maybe it should.
Yeah, that is so cool. So, wow. Okay. So you really have been. So really, it kind of started in 2019 is when you started making videos for the channel. It kind of started around there. You were dabbling a little bit with videos before that. You had the blog, which is really funny, dude, because before I got into video, I was also doing a blog, and I realized like the power of video. I was like, I don't think blogging is going to be as big as it is, and this was in 2019. And I'm like, I think I might need to pivot here. And so I went to video. So that's really interesting. But then, so then you start building it up. What was it like did you have it in the back of your mind that, hey, one of these days, something's going to hit the algorithm and I'm going to hit the jackpot here at some point? Like if I just keep going, did you have that in the back of your mind at all before it actually did hit?
Yeah, I did. So I was looking at other channels, and and I was seeing these channels that I thought were successful, and I would go in and I would try to figure out like at what point did they hit a certain number of subscribers or a certain number of view count, stuff like that. And so I would go through and I would like look at their earliest videos and I would count them. And I remember there's one or two creators that I determined that they had hit 10,000 subscribers around 40 videos. And I knew that those creators had grown fast. And so that was kind of like my benchmark was like, if I can hit 10,000 around 40 videos published, then I know that I'm growing as fast as those creators grew. And so that was always kind of the thing that I was looking for. And I remember it was like, I want to say it was like the 42nd video that I hit 10,000. And I was like, okay. And, and I don't know that was,
Unreal.
For real. And so like I just kind of kept looking at that kind of stuff and kind of measuring against other people. Like these are the people that I find successful on the platform. And I was looking at what they were doing. And so that was when I came up with the idea for a video a week. And so, I mean, even back then, even though I didn't think I'm going to make a living doing this. And I didn't even realize that those people were making a living doing this. I saw that they were what I was considering successful. And so I was like, they're doing a video a week. I'm going to do a video a week. Mm-hmm. And with no clue, knowing that from the blog and stuff like that, that brands would want to work with you and they would want to give you stuff, and that you might make a little bit of money here and there, but never realizing that you can make a living out of it.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think it is that separates your channel from some of the other channels? And in my opinion, before you answer, I love the production quality of your channel. And as an example, and I'll link this up in the show notes, I watched one about the bear spray. And the opening intro scene was so good, dude. It was basically like you were in the Wild West drawing your bear spray and you're cutting to all these different angles. And as a creator myself, I mean, like, I think as people, like, if they aren't creators, they just passively watch it, like, that's awesome. Me, I'm like, dude, that was super creative, man. Like, I was like jotting down notes and everything. But yeah, man, like, what do you think it is that separates your channel from maybe some of the other ones? Or what do you think actually made it blow up?
So I honestly, like, I have no idea. Like, I've obviously speculated about it. And I try to think about it and stuff like that. And a lot of times, like, it's very humbling. And I look at it and I just think, I'm just a guy. And, and I'll get comments all the time, I mean, like, how the comments are, like, people will come on and they'll get real rude and snarky and stuff like that. And they'll be like, this guy says he's an expert. And I almost always respond to those comments like, hey, I never said I was an expert. Like, like, you cannot find a video of me saying I'm an expert. You should listen to me, because it just doesn't exist out there. And so, like, I'm just a guy. I had an interest in video from a very young age. In fact, I went to film school for about a year.
Oh, wow.
And that didn't work out. And so I ended up going to graphic design, and then that didn't work out. And so, like, had a lot of different things, but been interested in photography. Had a dark room when I was a kid, like long before digital came around, and I would do like the dark room stuff with the photographs and all that kind of stuff. Had a video class when I was in high school. Went to film school for a little bit, and so I always had this interest in video, and always had this interest in photography. And so that's where, but even then, I mean, like, when I appreciate you saying, the quality is good and all that kind of stuff, but, like, I look at it and I think it could be so much better. Like, I know that my skills aren't where, like, I've seen other skills, from other creators and other things like that. And I know that there are things that I don't know how to do. But I also realize, that I've got this interest and I can figure it out and all that kind of stuff. And so what separates me, honestly, I've always felt like I've had a knack for explaining complicated things in a way that's easy to understand.
Exactly.
And I think that's what it is. And my wife tells me that the reason why I'm able to do that is because before I can explain something, like, I have to fully understand it. And so like, if I don't understand it, there's no way that I'm going to be able to explain it. Like, there's no way that I'm just going to be able to regurgitate information that I've heard, not fully understanding what that information means, and it makes sense. And so if I'm going to talk about something, like, I dive into it. I have ADHD, and so I get hyperfixation, and I get hyperfixated on, whatever the piece of information it is that I'm trying to figure out. And I just dig and dig and dig until it clicks, and I'm like, okay, like, I understand it. And then once I understand it, because I've had to do all that stuff to understand the way that it works, I think I'm able to explain it, because I'm able to explain it the way that I finally understood it.
I love that answer. And that is supported because some of the comments that I see on your videos also say that. Actually, one was from Justin Outdoors. And he says, and that's kind of where I put that in the intro, was you have a knack for explaining maybe complicated or boring topics, but in a very exciteful and way that people can understand it. And that's what I've seen throughout your channel. Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell you a quick story. So I had this potential sponsor, that I was really excited about this video and I wanted to do this video. And it may still happen, but I think I'm going to have to find a different sponsor because the sponsor just would not sign on to it because it's a very like scientific and technical heavy topic, right? But I was so excited about doing it. And I was like trying to get this sponsor to, excuse me, trying to get this sponsor to kind of like see my vision for it, right? And their holdup kept being, how are you going to make this interesting? Like, this is not an interesting topic. And there was this TikTok or this reel that was going around at the time. And it was, I don't know if you're a sci-fi fan, like anybody that's a sci-fi fan, the show Firefly or Serenity, it's one of my favorite all time. I'm a big sci-fi nerd and it's a favorite show of mine. And there's this clip in the show where it's Mel, the main character, who turns and says to one of the other characters, "It's what I do, darling. It's what I do." And they just, and so like, how things on Instagram like kind of take off, or TikTok kind of take off with this one clip, and like people were putting that on all kinds of different stuff.
Audio, sure.
Yeah. And so like that was going around, and the sponsor kept being like, "How are you going to make this interesting?" And so I sent that TikTok to him, and I was like, it's what I do, darling. It's what I do."
How did they take that?
They didn't buy it. And
no.
so
no.
so I actually think that sponsor has they're gone, and I think I'm going to have to find somebody else if I want to make the video happen. So
great freaking story there, dude. Well, that's awesome, dude. So obviously you have experience backpacking and doing a lot of camping and all that stuff in the outdoors. And I would love for you to share maybe like one or two experiences that have been maybe your most memorable backpacking trips, or maybe events that have happened to you while you've been backpacking. Because I feel like we maybe always kind of have some of those formative events in our life, whether that's a breakthrough hike or something like that. So I was just really interested into hearing some of those stories.
Goodness. I mean, so, like the stories that always stick out in your mind are the ones that, like stuff didn't go right,
Never. Yeah.
Where things were just terrible. Yeah. And so like I've got, forgive me. So like there's a couple of stories that come to mind. There's a story where I was hiking with my daughter. We were hiking in the backcountry and we got stuck on the wrong side of a raging river and had to get a ranger to come and rescue us. And then there's a story which isn't really a backpacking story, but it kind of is. It was I was coming back from the Grand Canyon. On a Jeep road, and we got two flat tires, and I had to figure out how to get out of there with two flat tires when I only had one full-size spare. And so like both of those are really long stories, and like I could get into either one of them if you're interested, but I mean, as far as like formative, backpacking stuff, I would say that even to this day, I've been backpacking for a fairly long time. The channel and the other people that are just like, that look at you as an expert kind of gets in your head sometimes. And you think, yeah, okay, I know what I'm doing, But still to this day, when I go out on the trail, I have like this anxiety that just kind of like sits in my chest like, okay, is this going to be the time that something like really seriously goes wrong? Or did I adequately prepare for whatever the conditions are going to be? Or, whatever it is. There's always this kind of like, and especially when I have other people with me that like I'm kind of responsible for. Mm-hmm. And so I was noticing this on a hike just recently. My wife and I were hiking in Idaho, and she had some health problems earlier in the year where she got pneumonia and had pneumonia for a long time without us realizing it, and got in a really bad situation where she had to be hospitalized and ended up going septic while she was in the hospital. And it was a really scary time for her, but she's good now, but she just hasn't quite been back to her full self since that happened. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She's lost some lung capacity. She's got foggy memory since that's happened. And so a hike maybe 2-3 weeks ago was our first hike since she'd had that episode. And so like I knew that I had her there, and I knew that she had diminished lung capacity. It's our first time that we were going to be in elevation. I mean, it was months later, and she'd been training and doing some things like that. But I had this anxiety of like, okay, like not only am I taking myself out into the wild, into the backcountry, but I'm taking her, and I got to keep her safe. And it was a kind of an early but a shoulder season hike, and so I knew that we were going to have some potential weather and stuff like that. And the whole time I'm just like, do I have everything that I need, and do I have the knowledge that I need to make sure that we're going to be safe? And almost every time I start a hike, I have that. But as soon as I set foot on trail, for some reason, like that just goes away and it just like dissipates. And as soon as I get, I would say even 100 yards onto the trail, like it just feels like, okay, like this, like everything's going to be good. Everything's going to be fine. And this is where I need to be right now. And so there's something about nature and the healing, part of nature that just dissipates that anxiety almost every single time.
So when you say it like just dissipates your anxiety, right? What do you think's behind that? Do you think it's because you actually are kind of more comfortable than you think in nature? Or like what do you think's behind that?
I don't know. So like part of me thinks that there's always that unknown. And I think that I don't think it happens as much when I've been on the trail before. And so like I do go back and I'll hike another trail, I'll hike a trail that I've hiked before. And so like I know what to expect on that trail. Like I know what's coming. I know that I've done it before. But there's always that like that uncertainty anytime you've never done a hike before and you've done the research, or maybe you haven't done enough research about the hike, because I'm hiking all the time, that if I poured as much research into every single hike that I've done, as probably people that hike 1 or 2 times a year, like that's all I'd be doing is researching trails and water crossings and conditions and, all that kind of stuff. And so to a certain degree, like I'm just heading out there. Like I do enough research to try to make sure that I'm going to be safe. But, and so I think it's just part of that, like the unknown of this trail or, this particular, range of mountains or whatever the case may be, that once I actually get foot on trail, I think it's like, okay, I do know this type of area. Like I do know, like this feels just like it's felt every other time. And so I think that's what kind of helps dissipate that anxiety a little bit, is it feels familiar once you finally set foot on trail.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and that's why we go backpacking, right? Is because there always is kind of a degree of chaos instead of order, right? That we're kind of stepping into, and that's like the point of backpacking in some ways. But I get the pit that you have. Like I get a pit in my stomach sometimes, especially if I'm solo, and I'm like, oh man, like maybe weather's coming in, or weather was forecasted, or is this the right trail, and stuff like that. And so, it seems pretty normal for backpackers, especially, but you don't have anybody out there to help you, especially if you're solo again, or like you said, taking care of people is a whole different realm, because now you're not really so much worried about your needs. It's more of like the other person, keeping them safe and making sure they trust your decisions and things. So I totally relate to that. What was the question I had? Oh yeah, that was it. Now, obviously, you're making some videos when you're going outdoors and doing some of these hikes. How have you integrated video into nature and into some of your hikes? And has it been an overall benefit to your hikes and spending time in nature, or has it drawn stuff away from it?
I think it does both, to be honest with you. And so, like, what I've noticed is when I'm not filming, I have a tendency to put my head down and just hike. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so like I'm just moving, and I'm not seeing as much stuff. I'm not paying attention to flowers or foliage that might be there. Forgive me.
You're good, dude.
And so I'm just like concentrated on getting, to the next, campsite, or to the next mile marker, or to where I'm stopping for lunch, or whatever that case may be. And so I'm not paying as much attention. And so the camera, I think, pulls me out of that a little bit, because I know that I want to get a shot of this, or I want to get a shot of that, or, oh, that's so beautiful. And so like, so I'm filming by myself a lot. And so like I have a tripod, I set up a tripod, I walk away from the tripod, I turn around, I walk back, and I get the tripod, and so I'm spending more time in those areas, especially when I see something beautiful.
True.
And it's it's causing me to turn around a lot of times, because I got to go back and get the tripod. And so then I see what's been behind me this whole time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's beautiful too. Like, and I hadn't even stopped to look at that direction. And so I think it does, it like pulls me out of the tendency to just, let's just go, and especially when things are hard. I mean, like whenever you, I mean, because almost every trip you get to that point where you're just kind of suffering a little bit, you know what I mean? And whenever you're just kind of suffering a little bit, like, I don't know about you, but I start getting kind of mouthy on the trail, and like, I'm like, nobody else is there, but I'm just like, oh, like you got to be kidding me, Or like, if I'm especially tired and all of a sudden like there's this big uphill, I'm like, what is this,
Right.
And even though like that's the whole reason I'm out there, but I still get angry at the fact that the mountain is being a mountain.
Yep.
And so that, I think the camera pulls me out of that a little bit, because I know that that I want to get the shots, that I want to get the video, that I want to be able to document it. But at the same time, I also sometimes I just want to hike.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to set up this shot, and I don't want to set up the camera, and I find that happening to me a lot. Like, I've got like a pretty good system going when I'm hiking, because I just carry the tripod, I set it down, I adjust it, I walk away and I walk back, and I'm good. But when I'm at camp and I'm like trying to document, whatever it is, like I'm cooking this meal, or I'm setting up this tent, or, or I'm airing up my air mattress, whatever the case may be. Well, then I got to think, okay, I got to put the camera here, and I got to do this. Okay, and now like it'd be better if I move the camera around and I got a second angle here, and I got this shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like I got the chance to meet. Do you ever watch any Craig Adams? Are you familiar with Craig? So I got to meet him just last month, and I was telling him that early on, like I would try to copy his style a little bit, and I would watch his videos and I'd be in awe of what he was doing. And I would go and I would like try to do that. And what I noticed was he just didn't, set up the tripod and just film himself setting up camp. Like he would get all these different angles, and it would be like these, what I learned in film school is called a match on action, where, you're setting up this pole, and then the camera changes, but you're still in the middle of setting up that pole.
Yeah.
While the camera switches angles. And so that means I got to set up that pole twice if I'm going to get a match on action, right? And so, but wanting to create that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the match on action. I'm going to set up the camera twice. Yep. And so there comes times where I'm just like, I just want to be at camp, and I just want to sit down, and I just want to, and I don't have to worry about the fact that, like, oh, I need to run up here onto this little hill so I can get this angle of the sunset or whatever. And, like sometimes I just want to enjoy the sunset. And so I've noticed that more and more lately, as I think some of the high of the channel booming and growing and all that kind of stuff, some of the excitement has worn off a little bit, that now I'm finding myself being like I really want to just enjoy the thing that I enjoy sometimes. And so I haven't made any plans yet, other than just the decision that I'm going to take a trip sometime in the future where I don't take a camera, and I'm just going to go, and I'm just going to backpack, and I'm just going to be there with me. And I might regret not having the camera, whenever I get out there, but I'm going to make the commitment beforehand and just leave the camera home and go on a trip. So
that's admirable. That would be so hard for me to do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Because, and one question I wanted to follow up with that would be, you were talking about struggling up that mountain, right? And getting mouthy with it and kind of mad, or when you're at camp, you're just like, oh man, I just want to like chill, right? What is it that makes you get the shots though? Like, what goes through your head to be like, you know what? I just have to set this up, or I just need to get this shot. Like, it would be great for the video. Like, how do you come to that conclusion when you're in those fatigued states? Because I know exactly what you're talking about. You're like, at the end of the day, long hike, the last thing you want to do is walk back and forth and set up your tripod and take it down again and set up the camera. So what do you think it is that makes you that drives you to do that?
I mean, sometimes I don't, like sometimes I'm just like, forget it. Like it's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the main thing is probably, for better or for worse, it's regret, because when I get back and I get the
Totally.
and I get the footage into the computer and I start putting it together, I'm like, man, I really wish that I had this shot, or I really wish I had that shot. And so I've done that enough times that now when I'm out there in the field, I'm like, get the shot, because you're going to want it later. And you're going to be mad at yourself later because you're just tired, And it's like, it's fine. Be tired and get the shot.
Yeah.
And for me, the thing, so like I've got a tripod that's like it's a full height tripod and it's carbon fiber. It's fairly light, but it's still heavy at the same time. And it can't get close to the ground. Right, like it's got about this much that that's as close to the ground as it can get, right? And so anytime I want a shot that's down at ground level, I have to flip the whole tripod upside down, and it supports itself, and the camera like hangs down in the middle of it, and the camera's upside down, and everything's backwards, because you're working upside down and you're trying to adjust the camera and all this kind of stuff, and the screen is like flipping because it thinks it's right side up, but it's flipping itself upside down so you can view it properly. And so like everything is just like, it's like working in a mirror, like it just doesn't work properly. And those are the shots that I always get the most frustrated with. But I know that they're always some really good shots, And so it's like, I do that a lot with like flowers. If there's a little flower on the trail, I always want to get a shot with the flower and it's in focus, but I'm out of focus and I'm walking away. And I always have to flip the camera upside down to do that. And it takes, I don't know, it feels like exponentially more time to do that than anything else. And so that's when I get the most frustrated.
Man, dude, I totally identify with everything you're saying, because I always tell the students in my course and stuff, I'm teaching them how to like do some of the filming, more so for like reels and TikToks and things. But I'm just like, man, like really what separates creators from people that don't create is just like having the discipline to document, essentially. When you don't feel like doing it, it's not convenient and you're super tired. I mean, and for most people, they don't want to do that. And so just having the discipline to actually just go out and just literally document what you're doing, you're already like in the top 90th percentile of creators, because most people won't do that. And so I always found that super, super interesting. And like some of the shots that you were talking about with like that match scene shot and then like the foreground of the flower and stuff, I don't know, you may be familiar with the channel, but this is a really good channel for anybody listening. Also, it's called Primal Outdoors. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's kind of like van lifey. Dude, he does the exact things. He does like those match cuts and he does like the foreground. And I've really looked at his channel and tried to model my channel off of that, because I think that he does such good cinematic work. So anyway, for anybody listening, and then for you as well, I think that's a really good channel to look at. Yeah. So
yeah, for sure.
Now, one of the things that I love about your channel is when you talk about gear, I've noticed this thing where you'll give like the pros and stuff to the gear, but you also will find things that you don't necessarily enjoy about it. And you're very honest about it. I love that. And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, for my audience, maybe like one or two things for a beginner hiker, and then one or two things for an expert, or like more of an advanced hiker. We won't use the word expert, right? But like, what are a couple pieces of gear for each one of those niches that you would recommend people pick up, or maybe they're not using and they should? One of the things, by the way, that you talked about for creator, or that I think in my mind for a creator, was those trekking pole magnet things.
Yeah.
Dude, because that's the worst thing. When I always throw my trekking poles or lean them somewhere or whatever, right? Because I'm setting up shots and stuff, and then you got to pick them up. And it's just like these little things that add up over the course of a day. So that was really cool for a creator. I'll link that below. But yeah, like, so what are maybe a couple things for each niche that someone might want to use?
Yeah, so I mean, like, whenever I think about beginners, I always think like, just use what you have, I mean, like, just get out there. I think that there's too many people that wait to go because they feel like, well, I don't have the right gear, or I don't have what I need, So I mean, go someplace that you're familiar with, go someplace that isn't too far from the car, so that if you end up and you realize you get out there and you're like, oh man, like I really don't have the right gear, like I'm freezing to death, you can get back to the car quickly and you can get out of that situation. But at the same time, just use what you have and get out there as soon as you can, because that's what's going to make you the most comfortable with it, is just having that experience. Like I said, like it gets in my head even after years and years of backpacking. And so the only thing that's going to help you get it out of your head is actually getting out there and doing it. And so that would be my best advice for a beginner. But then at the same time, like as you're building gear, and I realize that there's like a big debate about this on, in the backpacking world, but I think about weight from the beginning. Like think about the weight of your gear from the beginning. Because I tend to be more lightweight, more ultralight when I'm backpacking. But I'm not what people think of when they think like, oh, he's an ultralight backpacker. Like I've got a chair, like I've got a really nice sleep system that weighs more than, my tent does. Right. But then there's other things that I'm like, my overall pack weight is low. Because I don't care who you are. I don't care how manly you are, because that seems to be the comments I get is, like, well, just be a man and, just carry more weight. Right. Like carrying a bunch of weight is not fun. And even if you can do it, even if you have hit the gym, since the day you were born or whatever, even if you can do it, it's not fun to carry a bunch of weight. And so I think thinking about weight from the beginning is always something that beginners should do. And because the biggest hindrance to going lighter or going ultralight, however you want to say it, is the money. When you've already bought gear that's perfectly fine, functional gear, it's just heavy. It's hard to spend. You spend like $400 on a tent that weighs 4 pounds. It's hard to go spend another $400 to get a 3-pound tent or a 2-pound tent. Totally. Right. And so, but to me, I'm like, but they're the same price. You just, when you're starting out, you're not thinking, oh, like I need to think about how much overall weight I'm going to be carrying and where I want to save that weight. So that's what I would say is people are like building a kit. And so what was the other part of the question? Was it more advanced hikers?
Yeah. Then maybe intermediate, advanced-ish hikers. Yeah.
Oh goodness. So, I mean, I don't know there. I would say, find the gear that that makes you happy, that gets you excited, that gets you thinking about it. So that's something. So I've got a video from a while back where I did this video that I said gear doesn't matter. And I basically was like, kind of like I said just a moment ago, just get out there on trail. I've hiked with really expensive gear. I've hiked with really cheap gear, and I've enjoyed the experience every time. And that was kind of like the gist of the video, was like we get so caught up in like the gear that we're going to use that we don't actually enjoy the outdoors. And somebody commented on that video and was like, I actually think it's the opposite. I think when you think about the person that goes maybe 2 or 3 times a year at most, right? They're taking their vacation time to go out on the trail. Like that is the highlight of that person's year for a lot of people. Like they're thinking about that trip, especially if they had to get permits, like way in advance. And then they're like, okay, now I've got the permits and I got to make sure that I've got the gear that I need, and I got to make sure that I've got all the logistics figured out. What that is doing is that could be like a weekend, like a 3-day trip for that person. But by like researching the gear, researching the trip, figuring out what they want to take, figuring out if they feel like they're going to have the exact piece of gear that's going to make it that much better for them on the trip. And so they're watching videos like yours or like mine, and they're just like really getting into the preparation for that trip. They're essentially extending that trip from a 3-day trip to a 3-month trip, because they're thinking about it that entire time. And they may be at work and they may be like, you know what, all I want to do is I want to watch this video about this piece of gear because I think it's going to, make my trip that much better, that I've been planning for the whole year. And so they they stop whatever they're doing. You know, they're slacking off in their boss's mind watching the video, but they're in that trip already. Like
Sure.
they're there. And so to me, I think that's what,
Interesting.
you know, like the more advanced backpacker or an intermediate backpacker, like savor it all. And if you want to spend money, you don't have to spend money, obviously. But if you're going to spend money, you know, you're going to do it because you're wanting to make that one trip that you've been planning for so long that much better and last that much longer and all that kind of stuff. So
Interesting. I have never thought about it like that.
well, I didn't either until that one guy or person, I don't know who it was, commented on my channel. And so they kind of changed my whole philosophy on why we watch gear videos and why. And it all came about because I was getting frustrated because I'd have these, you know, like trip videos that I really loved making and nobody wanted to watch them, or it felt like nobody wanted to watch them. And then I make a gear video and everybody wants to watch it. And that and so I was frustrated about that. And that person said, well, that's why, because like when we're watching your trip videos, we're watching your trip, but when we are watching your gear video, we're thinking about our trip. And so that makes the difference.
Dude, I have noticed that as well. All of my, like, if I'm doing a specific, like, I just put something about Ultra shoes review or something like that up, and it's doing like super well for my channel. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I love that, but like, it's not my favorite video to create. I love doing the documentary style trip videos, man. Like, way more fun to me because you're setting up shots, you're telling stories. You really got to, like, in your edit, you're really trying to, like, okay, what's the story I'm going to tell? You know, you're really getting creative with it. Whereas a gear video is just very technical for me, at least. It's like, which is why I love, like, when you threw in, like I go back to that bear spray one, like the Wild West thing, like you're making it, at least you're like making it really creative and fun.
Yeah, you know, and from a creator standpoint too, like if we're talking to creators that's what they're wanting the subscribers or they're wanting the views or something like that. I think that making that shift in your mind can help you, because building a following on there's just watching the awesome places you've been is very, very difficult. Totally. And so I had a conversation with a guy who was he was an Antarctica guide, right? So I mean, his job was to go and take other people to Antarctica, and he was also a professional photographer, and he had this Instagram following that he was just struggling to grow, and he had beautiful images and beautiful video of all these different places he's been. And he was having a conversation with me. And he's like, how did you grow? And I was like, well, I think when people watch your videos or they see your pictures, they get jealous because they think I'm never going to be able to go there. Yeah. I'm never going to be able to be in this awesome place. Like, you're just showing off at this point. You're like, look at how awesome my life is. And people have a hard time relating to that. But when you talk about gear, or you talk about skills, or you talk about you know, anything that's related to the art of backpacking and the art of being outdoors, then they be like, okay, I can be a part of this because now this is helping me go to the places that I want to go. And so I think that's, it's easier. Obviously you can do it. And I've seen some of these channels that people have made gigantic followings off of just watching their trip videos. And I'm like, how did you do that?
I know.
But I think, go ahead.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but
you're good.
I have struggled with this as well because I've seen some creators that are on Instagram that are doing super well by literally just showing exactly what you were saying, like that guy in the Antarctica, though. And I'm like, well, how is this working? I'm like, they're not giving value in the form of, they're giving value in the form of like entertainment, right? But it is also like in my head, especially when this wasn't my job, I would look at that and I would be like, oh, that's unattainable. And like, it's cool seeing it a couple times, but like, I don't want to follow an account like that because it just makes me, as I went to my 9 to 5, be kind of almost more miserable in some ways. Right. Some people will be inspired by it, but at the same time, like, how is it that those accounts are doing so well? I don't. And so like, I try to mix in a little bit of that into my account just to provide like some credibility, at least in terms of some ways. Right. But like my account as a whole, especially like on the short forms, is more of like funny and value in the form of like teaching something, right?
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Like it blows my mind some of the creators that are able to monetize really well on that inspirational content, and I don't know how they're doing that.
Yeah, so I mean, like I think about this a lot, obviously, and so I think either they came in at a time when no one else was doing it, or they've just like grinded away for years and years and years to grow that kind of following. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today because I watched a Red Bull video. You ever seen you've seen some of the crazy stuff that Red Bull puts out, and it was a short. It was like a behind the scenes of like they had like this like rally car that was like jumping over like a Formula One car, and they had like all this different stuff that was happening in this shot. And I was like, man, like this one little short, like they put a lot of time and effort into creating this short. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, but it's just one more crazy thing that's happening. And there's so much of that happening on the internet. You know what I mean? Like people doing crazy, things that take a lot of time and effort to set up. Like they're a dime a dozen. There's literally hundreds of thousands of people that are putting that kind of effort into videos. And I think we just we get used to it when as viewers, as consumers of content. It's like, yeah, somebody else doing something amazing, someone else doing something crazy, someone else doing something that I'm never going to be able to do. And so I think it's whenever we make that connection with people of I'm bringing it to you, or we do something that they've never seen before, which is getting almost impossible to do, but within certain niches, you can definitely do that. And so that's something I will do is I'll look to other niches and I'll see what's niches. I always say a niche, but I'll look to other niches and I'll see what people are doing over there. And I'll be like, okay, no one's done that in the backpacking niche. And so I'm going to try to bring that into this and stuff like that. So
that's a freaking gold mine right there. That's a really good advice. One thing going back to, putting out those posts that are aspirational content and things, one of the things that I've found that works for me is I will load that caption with some story about the pictures or whatever it is that I'm putting up there. And typically the story will be something where I'm giving away maybe more of a vulnerability that I have, where it then makes it a little bit more relatable to the audience. And so the pictures are there and everything in my mind is like more of like, again, credibility for my page. Like, hey, this is, here's some of the things that I've done. So like when I do talk about this, like I do want you to know that I have some credibility at least in here, but also like trying to relate to them at the same time. So I found that to be quite effective, at least in terms of on Instagram and short form things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do it too. Like I'm going to talk about the gear. I'm going to talk about the skills or whatever it may be, but I'm going to do it in a freaking awesome location, so that it's not about the location, but the location I feel like is giving some of that credibility that you talk about. So
true. Yeah. Steven, we're already at an hour and this has been great. Dude, you are so articulate. You made my job here extremely easy.
Well, thank you.
I love guests like that. Made it extremely easy for me. So I appreciate it. Dude, have you ever been like, I feel like if something happened with YouTube, which I don't think it will because you're doing an awesome job, but I think you have a great like radio host voice. Have you ever been told that?
I've never been told that. I've been told I have a face for radio, but
dude, that's hilarious. Dude, you're super articulate and yeah, man, I've loved having you on here. How can people catch up with your channel? Where can they find you on socials? Give all the plugs.
I'm My Life Outdoors, just about everywhere. If you search My Life Outdoors on pretty much any platform, you'll find me. So
awesome. There it is. We'll link it up in the show notes. Okay, everybody listening, please leave a 5-star review on Spotify. That helps me out. And let me know who else you guys want on next. We'll see you for the next one.